Hey, I'm John Gordon with Positive University, and today my guest is Brendan Suhr. Brendan is a longtime friend and also a coaching legend. He was one of the coaches on the Olympic Dream Team, the original basketball Olympic Dream Team, also a longtime champion. How many championships have you won, Brendan?
Only two. Only two world championships, John.
Only two world championships with the Detroit Pistons and Chuck Daly. And then his coaching years go back and back to the very beginning, which is where I want you to take us, Brendan. When did you start coaching, or I should say, how did you get into coaching?
Naismith and I invented the game all the way back then. But this is I think it's my 45th year in coaching. And probably actually longer than that, because my high school coach was the great Hall of Famer, UB Brown. And imagine that, having someone like that as your high school coach. And immediately, John, as soon as he was coaching me, I knew I wanted to be a coach like him. And so he had a profound influence upon me. And during the summer, it's so different now in basketball than it was then. Basketball back then, for recruiting, for learning, it was about going to summer camps for a week. So when we were going into our sophomore year, he took me to what became the most famous basketball camp in the country, 5-star basketball camp. I'm from New Jersey, so it was just on the border of the Pocono Mountains in upstate New York, and about 2 hours from our house. And with my high school teammates, there were 48 kids in the whole camp, and it turned out eventually to be the biggest and best camp in the country. And the coaches that were there that week to teach 48 little kids was Chuck Daly, who was an assistant coach at Duke, the great George Raveling, who was an assistant coach at Villanova, Bob Knight, who was the head coach of West Point, and UB Brown. Those were the guys that were there doing the lectures of this incredible camp. And amazing, we had 24 kids in the pro league and 24 in the college league. And, that was the start. I went back to that camp every year. And then upon graduation from then going to college, again, I could have gone to many schools, but I picked Montclair State College because I wanted to be a teacher coach. I wanted to be a high school coach. Never got to achieve my dream. I'm a total failure in that respect. But I wanted to be a PE teacher. Couldn't see myself teaching English, history, or math. So I wanted to be a PE teacher to coach. And in the summer, I would work 10 weeks of basketball camp all over the country. Worked for Dick Vitale, worked for Frank Layden, went down to Duke University, worked for UB, but I also worked 2 weeks of 5-star camp. And there, I got to work with the best high school players in the country, and at the same time, made incredible contacts with college coaches because they came in and said, who is that player? Because back then we had no names or numbers even on the T-shirts. They had knew no one. And so it was my way of developing relationships. And as I found out, that's one of the biggest things to move ahead in life is to develop relationships. So I knew as a 19-year-old I wanted to be a coach and worked every summer on my craft. Dick Vitale was one of my people I worked 2 weeks for every summer because he was from North Jersey. And he actually gave me my first job. Not even when I graduated, about 2 months before I graduated college, he became the head coach at the University of Detroit. He was an assistant at Rutgers in New Jersey. I'm finishing playing. I'm doing my student teaching, and he calls me up and says, I want you to come and be my assistant coach. Yeah, I've never coached, but he knew that I would be good. And there were only 2 assistants in college back then. And that's where I started. And, and then, spent about 7 years in college and then went to the NBA and spent about 30 there.
Did you realize at the time with all these experiences that you were learning from some of the greats at the time, or was it just this was normal and what you knew?
Yeah, I mean, it was what I learned from. And so these people I knew were very good and they were very influential. But basketball was not a multimedia business. The NBA became a failing business back then. It was barely surviving. College basketball, there was no such thing as the Big East. The ACC had 8 teams. So college basketball was never on television back then. And so, yeah, I just knew that these guys were teaching me. But I didn't know what I was really getting into.
What advice would you give to a young person who wants to get into coaching? Should they go work at camp? Should they volunteer? How can they make contacts and gain experience?
Yeah, John, that's a great question because it's frequently asked. And unfortunately, the young people today, they want to skip steps. You know, we heard you and I when you were with me last summer in Las Vegas. We heard Brad Stevens talk about skipping steps, and they don't want to do that. If I told someone, you know, hey, you know, you're going to come work for me for 6 days, and I'm going to give you $75, you know, for the week, and they would say, you got to be kidding me, no way. And as one person once told me, Jack Donahue, who is, you know, the coach of Lou Alcindor at Power Memorial and then became the coach of Holy Cross and then the head of Canada basketball. You know, when I was coaching in the NBA, we were playing in an exhibition game in the Sky Dome. 70,000 people there to watch the Pistons play an exhibition. And he's doing television. And he says to me, Jack, you remember when I used to work for you and you'd pay me $75 at an overnight camp for a week in the mountains of the Catskills? He said, Brendan, you were overpaid then and you're overpaid now. And, you know, so nowadays, the people to sacrifice and to do that, it just doesn't happen. They want to go ahead. And unfortunately, they don't know how hard it is, John. I mean, if I told you, John, you could really be who you are today, but you're going to have to do about 200 speeches for free. If you told that to a kid nowadays, I'm not doing that. You know, our friend Tom Flick he thinks 500 speeches for less than $50 to get started after being an NFL player. And so I think the sacrifice part isn't it? But the big thing is relationships, showing that you have a passion for something and you're willing to learn. Young people now think they have all the answers and they have to. You don't. You don't have to have answers.
Okay, but if I am open and I am willing, then what would you tell me as a young coach or a young person who wants to coach? I just graduated high school or I graduated college and I want to be a coach and I'm willing to do whatever you say.
Okay, if you're a graduate of high school, I would say go find a college coach that you really think is good and then go and be a manager for him. You know, if you're not good enough to be a player, I'm assuming. So not in your case, you're a terrific player, but, you know, but if you were not a good player, then you go be a manager like Lawrence Frank did. And now you go learn from Bob Knight like Joe Abunassar did. And you be their manager and you take in and soak in all that knowledge. And then, you know, if you're a graduate, then maybe you become a graduate assistant doing the same thing, where you now have to learn from someone. You have to have someone that's going to invest in you, believe in you. That's the hardest thing. But they only are going to do that if they see how much you're willing to learn and how much you're willing to work. But I think you have to figure out who are the good people that are willing to invest in you. And sometimes, nowadays, the good people might be assistant coaches at a school, might invest in you. It doesn't have to be the head coach.
So tell the story about you and Dick Vitale recruiting Tony Dungy.
Well, so Dick and I are two guys from Jersey. Recruiting is not sophisticated. We get the job April 1st at the University of Detroit, which is a awful program back then. And there's no scouting services to speak of. Dick and I don't have a clue about anything in Detroit, in Michigan. We don't know one coach there. And so we basically picked out literally the day we got there, they put the all-state team in the Detroit Free Press. And we look, and they have, I never forget, Tom Lagarde was the number one player in Michigan. He went to North Carolina. He was at five-star camp, so I knew him. So he was at Catholic Central High School. He had it down to Michigan, Notre Dame, and North Carolina. I called him up, literally. We had no rules back then in college coaching, basically. I called him up and said, Tom, Dick Vitale and I are going to come visit you. Okay. And then when we got to their house, they laughed, you know. But now we go and we look through these. So there's a kid at Jackson, about 2 hours from Michigan, Tony Dungy. He's all state in football, and he's also a guard in basketball. So we literally get in the car. We're going to drive, cold call on every kid in the newspaper. So we go there, and Vitale's, because he has one eye, God bless him, I'm driving the car everywhere. I'm like a chauffeur. So I drive there. I go in and I see the principal, and I say, I want to see Tony Dungy. Could you get him? We're from the University of Detroit. She said, I think he's close to making a decision on the college, but can you please do it? So he comes down to see me, and he's a really nice kid. And I said, I just got the job, and I look younger than he is. I'm 21 years old. I said, can I have Coach Vitale, who just got the job 2 days ago, meet you and talk to you about coming to the University of Detroit? He says, well, I'm going to play football. You don't have football. I said, you need to talk to him, because if you don't, I'm going to get fired. And so he says, well, all right, I'll let you. So I go to the car and I said, I think he's close to making a decision, but he's willing to talk to us. So Coach Vitale comes in and he gives him, and he's one of the greatest motivators. He gives him the whole clue. And he's selling and telling him how enthusiastic and how we're going to change the program there. And he said, you got to come and give us a visit. He said, Coach, do you have football? He says, no, we don't have football. He says, well, I want to play quarterback in college. He said, well, we don't have football. And he says, well, Coach, I can't consider it. And he says, thanks a lot. We shake hands and everything. And to this day, every time I see Tony, I have to hug him and thank him, because I didn't get fired that day because he took the meeting with Coach Vitale. But and Tony tells the story with a lot more drama and flair. And as you know, he's a great friend of yours. He was so good, and he loves that story, because I think Vitale even told him we would start football again at the University of Detroit. But that was great. Tony's special.
What did you learn from coaching with Dick Vitale?
That there's no limit to hard work. He was the hardest working human being I've ever seen. He never thought that that anything was not possible. He believed that work ethic, enthusiasm, energy level, positivity could surpass anything. I think it had to do with his background. He came up the hard way. He was always an underdog in life, and he just kept, always surpassing he always surpassed what was expected of him. And it was, I tell him, and as he always says now, he married about, like most of us, about 10 steps over his head. His wife, Lorraine, is a superstar, and he overachieved so greatly with her. So that, for him to even ask her on a date, that just tells you what a sales guy he was. He's just an amazing guy. And, and I think, now that, you see what he's done, the way he's, dedicated his life to raising money for cancer and the V Foundation and all that, pediatric cancer, I think you see where he's taken that passion now and just channeled it into helping others.
I love that. How did you get then to the Detroit Pistons?
Well, I went back east to Fairfield University, to get a little closer to home. And it was about an hour north in Fairfield, Connecticut. Had a big time program. And then I worked on my master's degree, and I was, rolling along, and I kind of wanted to thought I was ready to be a head college coach and stuff. And then one day I got a call from a very close friend of mine, Mike Fratello, who was an assistant with the Atlanta Hawks. And he said, UB and I are going to be in Washington, D.C. for the NBA league meetings. We want you to come down there. UB wants to talk to you about a product that he wants to sell, and he wants you to be the distributor. I said, Mike, I can't come. I'm taking a course, my last course for my master's. It's 10 days, 4 hours a night. I can't miss a class. He said, we'll get you back in time. Take the shuttle down, meet with us, and then you can fly home. I said, okay. I go down there. They're in NBA meetings, and I don't know anything about the NBA there. And I'm looking, and there's Red Holzman and Bill Fitch and Red Auerbach's walking around, all these famous people. And I'm watching these guys in the lobby of the hotel, the Mayfair Hotel, downtown Washington. And all of a sudden, UB, again, who's my high school coach and, my mentor and the person I really worship in coaching, he and Fratello come out of a meeting, and they go, let's go. And we go up to their room, and now I'm expecting I'm going to see this product that I'm going to help them distribute. And UB says, Frank Layden, just our assistant coach, became the general manager of the New Orleans Jazz, which later that month became the Utah Jazz. He said, I'm offering you the job as an assistant coach. I'm telling you, I fell right off the bed. And I said, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know anything about the NBA. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And he goes, and UB didn't ask like, hey, you interested? He just said, your salary is going to be $35,000, $37,500, and $40,000. Is that okay? I'm making $11,500. I'm saying, yeah, it's more than my dad was making after 35 years at Chrysler. I was saying, yeah, that's fine. That works out good. And he says, okay, good. We'll call you at the end of the meetings. You can leave now. That was it. And that's how I got into the NBA. I don't know how the hell I got in there. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know a thing about it. But it just shows it's all about relationships. Fratello and UB were incredible mentors and friends. And for some reason, they thought I fit into what they were looking to do.
And then you worked with Chuck Daly. You won 2 world championships with the Detroit Pistons. What did you learn from those teams as a coach? What did you learn from Chuck Daly? And what do you love to share now as part of your coaching model?
Well, I think, from UB and Mike Fratello, they gave me all this strategic and technical knowledge. I thought, man, after working with those guys, I was really an advanced coach in the league. And then when I went with Chuck, I found out that he just said, I want you to come in. These players have heard me for 5 years. We went to the finals last year. They're tired of my voice. So I want you to come in, and I want you to, again, we only have 2 assistants. I want you to be the top assistant, and I want you to take over and do most of the teaching and stuff. And I'm stunned, because Chuck was a great coach. And it was really, he had so much confidence that he could delegate, very similar to what football guys do with coordinators now. And if you had walked into one of our practices with the Pistons, John, during those years, you would have thought I was the head coach of all the coaching that I was doing in practice. But anytime something really important had to happen, Chuck stepped in. So it allowed him to step back and now re-energize himself, but also take control of the team, because someone was doing, frankly, the work that wasn't as important as being the CEO. And I thought that was good. But what he said that I thought I've never forgotten is, I think you have to, he said, I'm never going to hire anyone that's not a better coach than me. Frankly, that was all BS, because he was such a better coach than I was. But he said it. And Bear Bryant had the same philosophy. Nick Saban feels the same way. They're comfortable in their own skin that they want expertise around them. And that's what I would encourage any coach, any business person to do, is hire great people around you. Have enough confidence that they're going to be loyal to you, but at the same time, your players and your people that work for you in business, they only trust people that have great credibility. If you don't know what the hell you're doing, it doesn't matter. And so I think that was a big thing. But Chuck taught me communication. He was a master communicator. And for someone that never played in the league, he communicated better than any guy that had played in the league. And he was able to reach all kinds of kids, from an Isaiah Thomas, who's a genius as a player, to a Bill Laimbeer, who is a genius as a person, to Dennis Rodman, who, everyone thinks was a very tough person to coach, but he wasn't. He was actually very simple, because he was all about the right things. But and Joe Dumars, who never said a word, he just always did the right thing. So he understood how to connect to everyone. And I think that's one of the biggest things you have to do in coaching now, is to connect to people. And he really mastered that.
What made those 2 championship teams so great, and how were they able to win those championships? And then now, what do you share with teams to be like them?
Internal leadership, John. I mean, if the only leadership a business has, a team has, is the head coach, you're in trouble. It's got to come from the people that are working by your side. And that, in this case, that's players. We had 6 different players that all led uniquely in their own way, but there were 6 of them holding each other accountable. Frankly, it made our job really easy. Really, we didn't, because when they screwed up, we didn't go in the locker room and have to chew them out very often. They chewed each other out. And that, I think, is important. They held each other. I think right now, and business, but more importantly in sport, there's very little of that. Players don't want to step on each other's toes. They don't want to, hold each other accountable. Big problem is they don't communicate to each other because all they do is they text each other. You could be sitting next to me in the locker room and I don't talk to you. I text you. I'm sitting right next to you. So we have a really unique communication problem nowadays. But back then, when we would go to a city, whether it be when I was with the Hawks and I had Doc Rivers playing for me and Randy Whitman, I had several guys that became NBA coaches. And these players, they would go, when we got to a city, they would go out to dinner with each other. That doesn't happen anymore. They're almost like 12 or 14 different corporations. They go, they get in a room, they order room service. There's very little communication. And I think that's how you really build a team. And anything is by that communication where you really know people.
How did you and Chuck empower the players to be leaders internally?
Well, you know what? I think one of the things I actually teach coaches now is like when, there's a term in any sport, but really in basketball, when we do a pregame scout and we're going over what, let's say if we're playing Golden State, what they're going to do. And you say, here's how we're going to defend things. In football, same thing. And so our preparation for the game. And there's many ways that you can defend plays like pick and roll and isolations, et cetera. And Chuck would turn to the players and say, Isaiah, how do you guys want to defend Jordan on this pick and roll? Or how do you want to do it? Dumars, how do you want to guard Jordan? And he let them answer. We didn't say, because all of a sudden, John, that's where the buy-in came. So he understood how to get buy-in, and buy-in was for believing. They have to believe in that. So I think also he valued people's opinions. And I think a lot of people now, and parents are the biggest fault of this. We never ask the kids what they think. We just tell them what to do. And I think all of a sudden, then when they walk out of the house on us, they have to make decisions. They're not prepared how to make decisions because we've told them everything to do. It's the same thing in sport. The game's going up and down. What do they want to do? Because there's a bet. What we found is that even if they pick the wrong way to defend a pick and roll, we'd change it at the first time out. They say, how's that working? Oh, not too good. Okay, what do you want to do now? Let's trap the pick and roll. Okay, and I think it allowed them to be active participants in their own survival, as we say, kind of like, rafting on a river, there's no lifeguards.
That's awesome. When would Chuck ever get upset? Would you ever get upset with your team? And if you got upset or they were doing something wrong, how did you respond? How did you handle difficult situations?
Of course you get upset. Sometimes it would be being silent with them. Very rarely would he scream or yell. Post game, when we lost the game, he literally, and I found this to be so unique because it was unique in the NBA and really unique in college. We would walk into the locker room and he would say, okay, practice tomorrow, 11 o'clock. And you'd say like, okay, when do we yell at the guys now for losing? No, because he wanted to watch the film and he had a saying, he had a lot of great sayings, John. One of them was, I got to get past mad, because if I yell at them and act mad, guess what? They're not going to hear me anyway. And I think it's really important that all of a sudden you might scream and yell at a player and you find out when you watch the film, he didn't make a mistake. But what you did is you damaged him by yelling at him. So I think what he did is he really was the one that emphasized to me, you have to coach every player differently and you have to treat each situation. Like I'll never forget when we went to the Orlando Magic and we didn't have a very good team. And we're playing, I'll never forget, John, because I was there last week. The night before Thanksgiving, we played the Miami Heat, Pat Riley, and they had a great team. Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning, those guys, they were great. And I had Penny Hardaway on our team, but they annihilated us. They beat us like 85-60, okay, at home. And we walked into the locker room, and he said, guys, take tomorrow off. See you Friday morning for practice. He walked into the press conference and he said, hey, I got outcoached. Pat Riley outcoached me. Don't blame those guys in the locker room. It was all me. Now, he's a Hall of Fame coach. and it wasn't his fault, but he took it. So every now and then you have to take responsibility so that your players, I see too many coaches throwing players or parents throwing children under the bus when things go wrong. Where is the responsibility, the collective responsibility that we have in this? And I think that's so important. But Chuck taught me how to be a man as a coach.
You taught me shout praise, whisper criticism. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we basically got that, from, really from, coaching Isaiah. He was just physically as tough a player. He's from the west side of Chicago, just physically so tough. But sometimes players that are really physically tough and mentally tough and are experts in their field, they don't really like to be criticized themselves. They don't mind giving it out. And so what I found out from coaching Isaiah was he wasn't the best at accepting criticism. So I had to figure out how to coach him positively. And so what it was I basically, if I wanted to basically be critical to him, I would stand up during the game, walk over to him, and literally point at the scoreboard and sit and act like I'm telling him something regarding time and score. But basically I was saying, hey, Vinny Johnson's just hit 6 shots in a row and he's sitting over here. If you don't start taking care of business, Chuck's going to put him in. You might not get back in the rest of this half. No one else knew what was said. No one to this day knew what was said. So I think you have to have some ways to communicate. So I think the shout praise and whisper criticism has to do with making sure that we don't leave scars on players or children. A lot of parents think that, all of a sudden, because I'm the adult, I can scream at someone and they have no feelings. Or I'm a boss of a company and if someone works for me, I can say anything I want to them. That's not true. They have feelings and players have feelings. No matter what your bank account says, if you're making $10, $12 million a year, they have feelings. I'll give you an example. Kevin Durant's one of the most sensitive players in the league. And so Steve Kerr has to make sure he's using all that positive coaching alliance stuff that he's learned from those folks out there, but truly only found out from your books, and said, hey, this is what I have to do to get Kevin to do it. And Steph Curry, but Draymond, he's not as sensitive because he played for Izzo. So Tom jumped his ass a lot. So he can coach him a little harder. He can be more demanding with him. So I think you have to make sure you evaluate every player and child, because every one of our children, you and I have 2 children, they're each uniquely different, and you coach Cole different than you do your beautiful daughter, and you raise them differently. And that's how you have to do players and people at work. Same way.
So I know you're about to use another word besides stuff when you talk about positive alliance, but I know that.
But this is a Christian.
But I know.
On my podcast, I use them all, baby. I got 4 or 5 letter words on my podcast.
Well, I'm a person of faith, but this show isn't. But I know. But I know you don't believe that. I know you believe in positive coaching. I know that's
absolutely.
What are 3 mistakes that leaders and coaches make in terms of how they interact with their players, how they coach, how they lead, or how they lead even their organizations? What are 3 mistakes?
Well, I think one of the things we do is, we don't teach players how to communicate. We always say, hey, you got to communicate. Well, how do you communicate? We have to teach them how to communicate. So if you want players to talk on defense, what do you want them to say? And so it's so important that when we say we want them to do something, you have to actually teach them how to do it. So communication is, as we both know, is the number one thing in life and in relationships, but you have to teach them what you want them to say. You can, talking about football or basketball, offense or defense, you have to communicate. But what do I say? What do I say? And then a big thing is, I believe there's a coaching window, John, for how to handle mistakes. And most coaches, when a mistake is made, they scream and yell and berate the player slash child or coworker. And I think that when a mistake is made, and every sport is filled with mistakes, there's a 2, 3, or 4 second window after the mistake is made that you better correct the behavior, not the person. So my thing is, if a player's made a mistake, I haven't done a good job teaching. So I have to now say, hey, here, on this pick and roll, come off the pick 2 dribbles before you throw the bounce pass. Don't try to throw it on 1 dribble. There, and as opposed to, you stupid SOB, what are you doing? And now everyone in the place knows, oh God, that kid is a moron. That's not the case. So that's one of the big things, that using that window of 2, 3, or 4 seconds to correct the behavior and reteach rather than annihilate or berate the player. And don't leave, as I was saying before, don't leave scars on players, because when you do leave a scar on someone, you can't get it off. You can't get it off. And, I watched last night a 30 for 30 movie on Bob Knight. My God, I said to myself, I am so glad I just did that PhD in coaching course, because Coach Knight should have taken it, because everything he did as far as, the way he coached players was absolutely wrong. And he was one of the most biggest winning players. That doesn't mean he couldn't have been better. Can you imagine how good he would have been if he loved his players, he served them and cared for them? Imagine that.
What are 3 things that you teach in this PhD coaches course? So you have a PhD in coaching course, which I think is amazing. You're sharing a lot of wisdom and knowledge in this course. What are 3 key takeaways that you want coaches to leave with that?
Well, I think the old days, John, it was about coaches, my UB Brown, my Mike Fratello. It was all about command, Bob Knight, control. I am in charge. I'm the coach, Vince Lombardi. Now it's about, I think you have to seek to connect. If you can connect with your players and not worry about control, that I think is number 1. I think you got to be transformational, not transactional. I would give up all my wins, all my championships to totally love my players and teach them how to be young men, teach them how to go forth in life. Or if I'm coaching a women's team, to become great women. It's not about me. When I hear coaches talking about, I want to see if my offense can beat your defense and my defense can stop your offense, are you kidding me? It's not what it's about. It's about developing young people. Or at the professional level, Steve Kerr had a little crisis a couple of weeks ago with Draymond and Kevin Durant. There's a great teaching opportunity. Trust me, in pro sports, in college sports, that those things happen all the time. And you know what? That's crisis management. That's what it's all about. But it happens in business. Guess what? It also happens in parenting. Same skill set. And then the last thing I think is about getting buy-in. We got to get buy-in, all the time. No matter what you're teaching, you got to get buy-in. And that happens when the players believe in you. They will not buy into you unless they believe in you. And so that is where credibility and your competency level comes in. And again, as a parent, if they don't believe in what you're saying, or they see that you're coming home and you're not behaving properly and you're telling them they got to come in at curfew and they see how you're behaving, you have no credibility with those kids. And young people do not miss a thing. They don't. So guess what? The hardest people to coach are great players. The hardest kids to parent are really smart kids because they know. And so I think, I want to make sure they buy into what we're selling.
When you work with a business or business leaders, what principles do you take from the sports world and the coaching world to the corporate world?
Number 1, it's about relationships. If you're selling, you're in marketing, you have to have relationships with the people you're selling. You just can't say, hey, we got this great product and you're going to buy it. And so, I think number 1, it's about and developing trust, and trust might be in your coworker. So, I have a friend, Andy Stanley, and he has a great quote, trust is the ultimate form of human currency. and it's a great saying. But I think, the things that we want to emphasize is about relationships, is about trust, is about making sure that you're connecting with your people, and that your business, you have to be, whatever you're in, you have to be an expert at it. And I want you to also have a growth mindset and that you can develop and learn. I am on a journey. I think I told you, I think I'm 45, 46 years of doing this business right now of coaching. And you know what? I think I'm only beginning, because I feel like I'm starting over, because I keep learning and learning. And as I go out and teach coaches, I keep learning from them. And so the most I've ever learned, John, is from my players. And you know what? If you're in business, the most you're going to learn is from the people that work for you. And so don't act like you can't. Be a continuous learner, have an open and growth mindset. And I think, and love the people you're with. I always tease you, when you wrote to Carpenter, the ultimate, leadership model, is about loving the people you work for, serving them endlessly, and then caring about them. If you do those things, you're a champion. And so, I give you credit for it once, and then it's now my idea about love, serving, care. But you know what? I think that's what it's about. And it's not some incredible formula like calculus. It's just something so basic. And treat people well, treat people the right way, treat people the way you want to. I mean, this is not, and that's why I think, your message that you talk about positivity is so incredible, because we all want to be coached, parented, and led in business in that manner.
I also love that you talk about leaders being coaches, and leaders have to coach their teams. And that's something you taught me in terms of, if you're a leader and you have 12 direct reports, you have to coach those direct reports to be better leaders. And that's how you cascade leadership down the organization. Talk about that.
I often will tease people in business. I'll say, how many meetings do we have here? Like Marriott used to be a big client of mine. And I'd say, how many meetings? And they'd raise their hand. No, we have one a week, so, with vacations, they're going about, they're going, okay, 48 meetings a year and stuff. And then some people say we have about 3 meetings. And I'd say in the NBA, we have 2,800 meetings a year, 2,800. The difference is our meetings last sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes 1 minute. And in 1 minute time, I have to select the talent that I'm going to have in the game. I've got to motivate the people. I've got to come up with a strategy. And then 20,000 people are going to judge whether I know what the hell I'm doing. And that is coaching. That is leadership. And so if you can do that, and, the biggest thing that we would do in business with all the companies I'd work for is at the end of the only thing I could guarantee that would ever happen at the end of our 1 hour meeting is we would plan when the hell the next meeting was, and then in 2-3 months at the end of the quarter, we would be losing money. They would say, yeah, let's blame the people that were selling the stuff. Okay. And not anyone that was making the decision. So I think this is one of the things that, I had as a coach, had to separate responsibility. If things didn't work, that's my fault. It's my fault. And, and the players, we have a saying that, as a coach, the notoriety of a coach, John, comes from the execution of his players under pressure. How about that? Kevin Durant is a great player because in the finals 2 years in a row, he's executed at such a level, he's the MVP. Steve Kerr is a great coach because he's won championships 3 of the 4 years he's coaching. Because under pressure, his teams perform. And so it's the same in business. Guess what? It's the same in parenting. So you got to get those people to believe that. But it's not about the length of the meeting. It's about what we're doing there. And there's a clarity come out that we all know we're all on the same page.
When Chuck Daly was asked if he is a great coach, what did he say?
He said, I'm a good coach when I have great players. And because it's all about talent. It's all about talent. If I have no players and I am your friend, Sean McVay, Dave Roberts, you give them the worst team in each league, they're not going to win any games. They're going to look like Buck Showalter's team. They're going to look like, the worst team in the NFL. They're going to look like John Gruden's team because they don't have players. But if you have really good players, that's when I'll be judged that I'm pretty good, but I'm not great. I'm never going to get to great. I'm never going to get there. I'm just going to be okay, but I'm going to maximize that talent.
Because it's a coach's job, it's a leader's job to maximize their talent, to have their talent work towards greatness, to bring out the best in them. That's a coach's job, right?
Leadership, coaching, parenting, it's never about me. It's about the player, the child, the workers. It's never about me. That's because we have someone that might be in charge of our country now that everything is about him, okay? That's not leadership. It's not. It's about the people in our country. It's not about him. It's about all of us, the other 349 million. That's who it's about. Those are his players. That's who you got to focus on.
Tell me about the Olympic Dream Team and Chuck Daly's first meeting with them and what Michael Jordan taught you. I love the story.
Yeah, okay. So now for a year and a half, we knew Chuck was going to be the Olympic coach. So he and I are coaching the Pistons. We're flying all over the country, playing our schedule. And on the plane, after we played a game, we played the Knicks, we're flying to our next city, we're flying back to Detroit. I might say to him, hey, what do you think you're going to say in that first meeting? What do you think we should, discuss with? I don't know. This went on for a year and a half, and I'm trying to pull it out of him. We even went to Europe. We did a clinic, and 1,400 coaches are in Europe, pro coaches, the year before the Olympics. We're over there in that environment. I said, Chuck, what are we going to say to these guys when we're coaching our players? First meeting, what are we going to say? I don't know. I'll figure it out. And Chuck had this wonderful saying, John. He'd say, whatever. Anytime he didn't want to tell you anything, he'd just say, whatever. And so we had the first meeting at the Sheraton Torrey Pines in La Jolla, California, just outside San Diego. We walk in there. The tables are in a U-shaped form. There's no head of the table. Chuck is sitting there, and all those incredible dream teamers are there. Jordan, Magic, Barkley, Chris Mullin, Ewing, etc. And so all of a sudden, Chuck says, guys, the number one thing is we have to win the gold medal. We cannot come back. If we don't win the gold medal, none of us can come back. We're done. Do I have your commitment that no one's going to care about how many minutes you play or how many shots you're going to get, that we only care about winning? All 12 players go, yep, we're there. Okay, that was good. Well done, Chuck. I still didn't. The second thing is, he says, the next thing, and the only other thing I'm concerned about is you got to be on time. And I'm saying to myself, for a year and a half, we flew all over this damn country, and all you got is you got to be on time? Chuck, come on, man. And he now looks right at Michael Jordan, and he says, Mike, he says, if you're not on time, that means you don't respect Magic. And Magic, if you're not on time, it means you don't respect Charles. And Charles, if you're not on time, it means you don't respect Malone. And if you're not on time, it means you don't respect Bird. And then Ewing, David Rupp. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's all about respect. It had nothing to do about time. Time was what gave respect. So he said, tomorrow, first practice, 11 a.m., bus outside. That's all he says. The next day comes, 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, I'll make like I'm working. I'll go outside and see if the bus is there. I go outside. I look, there's a bus sitting outside. I pop my head on the bus. Of course, no one's there. Look in the back of the bus, in the last seat, sitting there is Michael Jordan. 1 hour before time to leave practice. And all of a sudden, I say, hey, Mike, I said, we're leaving at 11. He says, I know. For 6 weeks, the closest that anyone came to being late was one player was 10 minutes early. For 6 weeks, all they did was they would come 20, 30 minutes early because they wanted to respect each other so much. And that was the essence of with any team. It's about respect for each other. And it was one of the great leadership lessons I ever learned. And once again, Chuck knew what the hell he was doing, played like he didn't, and just knocked it out of the park. And I think that's a huge thing, and it works with every group. And I use it with every group to talk to, because if you don't respect the people you work with, you're not going to be a good team. You're not going to be a good company. You're not going to be a good family.
Simply amazing. Brendan, what are you excited about now going forward on this journey of life and coaching and leading?
You know what, John, I want to help. I've always been in charge of 12 to 15 players, trying to help them, but now I'm trying to help thousands. I want to make an impact with thousands of people in all walks of life. Sports is just it's just a group of people. Small group leadership teams are what it's all about. And so, to make an impact in people's lives, to change things. I've been blessed to, have an incredible life with a lot of victories, great family, great coworkers that I deal with, been on great teams. I want to help other people become great leaders, great coaches, and have great teams. And so it doesn't matter if you're in sport or not. I just want to make an impact on people. Leadership, coaching, and building teams is what life is all about. Our country is a very big team with a lot of people in it. Right now, if the United States, it's the first time I've ever said this, if the United States was a team, our team would be fired. We wouldn't be in the playoffs. And this is the greatest country in the world. That's scary because we don't have one heartbeat. We're so fractured. And you got to get back to being a team that everyone is united and trying to do the right thing. We're not the United States, unfortunately. And everyone always says, oh, we're the best country. We're the smartest country. We're not. We're not. We have too many. What we have in the schools with guns and everything like that, how can we be the greatest country if we're stupid enough not to help our people? The young people in our country, from your children on down, they from 9/11, all they've seen, John, is terrorism, school shootings, and bad things happen. No wonder they have such fear in their hearts all the time. No matter, they'd have trust because they don't know what's happening. We got to get back to that. That's the biggest game that we're playing, is the game of life. And I'm just happy to be a part of it because, it's almost like the old missionaries, John. One by one, you're plucking them off. Every time you do a talk, every time you write a book, you're bringing people in to be followers. That's what this is all about right now.
Brendan, how can people find out about you and also about your movement, about your work that you're doing?
Thank you. Follow us at Twitter, at Brendan Suhr, at coaching_you, and then, coachingyoulive.com is an other website. And, and my PhD in coaching class, that thing, when we did it, we wanted to coach all coaches, and not, this had nothing to do with basketball. And now some business folks have reached out because it's all about communication. It's about relationship. That's the things that we want to do. So all we're trying to do is figure out ways to help. And so, John, as always, you're an incredible friend. I like to work with younger people like yourself. You're a great inspiration. But what you're doing and how you're helping people, it's one. I've said before, I think you're the most impactful person, maybe in sport and outside of sport, in the last 15 years. And for that, I'm so proud of you.
Hey, thanks, Brendan. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate your coaching of me throughout the years, giving me great advice, great wisdom. I know you've coached so many people. I've met so many coaches, Doc Rivers, Billy Donovan, all these great guys that you've impacted. And I just wanted to share your wisdom and you with the world, because a lot of people, maybe the younger people, don't know who Brendan Suhr is. Well, now these younger people, they do. And I know they'll benefit from coaching you. They'll benefit from you, your advice, your wisdom, and all the good stuff you're sharing. So thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it, brother.